Namaskar. Tomorrow is the budget for 2022. Now, this budget is very important. Important why? Because A, unemployment rising, inflation growing like nobody's business, the inequalities of income, even that is growing. So, this budget is going to be very important. Politically, it is important because 5 states are going in elections in the next 2 months. So, from all angles, this is a very important budget. So, let's discuss about this budget. And I have Professor Arun Kumar with me. Sir, welcome to my show, sir.
No,
And how are you today?
fine, thank you. I hope all is well with you.
All is well with us, sir, except for the fact that it is quite hot in Mumbai. So, we don't
Oh,
have the pleasure of wearing warm clothes. Sir, tell us how is the budget looking?
so as you said, you see, what does a budget do? Budget looks at the problems that are currently being faced in the economy and what needs to be done in the future. So on these two parameters, as you rightly said, the problem is unemployment, loss of incomes, the unorganized sector doing very poorly, agriculture also losing incomes and farmers protesting. And then the coming elections in UP, which are very important for this government. So therefore, they have to apply some correctives. Now, where do the correctives need to be applied? That's the big question. So, for instance, the first issue that I think comes up in everybody's mind these days is unemployment, because youth is protesting and unemployment has been rising because of the lockdowns, because of the closure of the unorganized sector units, people having gone back to the villages, and there they're demanding work under the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. But the allocations have been inadequate because last year the allocation was 1.1 lakh crore, it was cut down to 70,000 crores, and many people are complaining that they have not been able to get work. And even the official data suggests that people are getting only 50 days of work as opposed to 100 days of work that they're supposed to get. Now, in a situation where work is not available, other work is not available, and then, how would a family survive if one member of it gets 50 days of work in a year? That comes to an average of 10 days per person per year, which is not enough to survive. So therefore, employment generation in rural areas, that needs to be stepped up. For that, the allocation to the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, that needs to be stepped up quite drastically. So in my estimate, instead of 70,000 crores, it should be given at least maybe about 3 lakh crores. Similarly, urban youth is complaining of unemployment, not able to find suitable jobs. People are applying for very low category peon job, etc. Even if though they've done PhDs, they've done BTech, MTech, etc. So there needs to be creation of jobs in the urban areas as well. Now, where do we create jobs? We can create jobs in areas of education, in areas of health, in areas of drinking water schemes and roads and other such things. So urban employment generation, like rural employment generation, is also very critical. But if we set our mind to it, we can do it. So announcements have to be made that we'll have a employment generation scheme for the urban areas also. Then the micro sector suffering. The micro sector is the dominant number of units in the country. There are 6,000 large units, 6 lakh small and medium units, and 6 crore micro units. And the micro units employ 97.5% of the workforce of the MSME sector. So the micro sector is doing badly. That will be a lot of unemployment. And children who are coming into the job market, about 16 to 17 million children who come into the job market, they will not be able to find work and they'll have nowhere to go. So therefore, micro sector has to be helped. Now, how can we help the micro sector? The first thing that has to be done is micro sector has to be dealing from the MSME, because MSME means micro, small, and medium. But micro is very unlike small and medium. And whenever something is announced for the small and medium sector, the micro sector gets all the benefits. The micro sector is not able to get it because small and medium preempt these benefits. So how do we give micro sector working capital so that they can revive? They have lost their working capital during closures. They must have borrowed from the local money lenders, etc., at very high cost, and that would mean that they become unviable. So that needs to be done. Then within the micro sector, trade is very large. Now the trade sector, what has happened is e-commerce has come in a big way, which has meant that those who are working in the traditional shops, there the employment would have dropped quite drastically. So how do we help them? And that is where I think we need to look at the trade sector and try and help them also by having schemes by which they can modernize the trade sector also. So in other words, these are some of the sectors that need to be given immediate help. Then the farming sector is complaining that cost of production has risen, fertilizer prices have risen, and input cost like diesel and so on has risen, energy costs have risen. So their cost of production has gone up. Now, if the cost of production has gone up, then unless the minimum support price goes up or the market price goes up, they will not be getting the income that they were getting earlier. And that's why there's protest there. So I think the farming sector also needs help. So these are some of the things that need to be done in the budget to overcome the problems that have been coming and to make it, a smooth transition in the future. Now the government is in a sort of a mode of denial because the government keeps saying that the rate of growth this year is going to be 9.2% and the next year will be 8%. But that data does not take into account the unorganized sector. The unorganized sector has been declining, and the quarterly data that the government puts out on the basis of which they say 9.2% or 9.5% growth and 8% growth, that does not take into account the unorganized sector independently. It is assumed that the unorganized sector is growing at the same rate as the organized sector. So our data is not able to capture the decline in the unorganized sector. So the rate of growth of the economy is much less than what the government is claiming.
So, sir, essentially what you're talking about is stepping up expenditure. Sir, where does the money come from?
You see, uh, money is a question of the political will. What is it that you want to do? So say the budget for this current year was slated to be 34 lakh crores, right? Now, how do you distribute that 34 lakh crores? In what categories do you distribute it? You know, so a our priorities have to be refocused so that we give more to the areas where the crisis is. So we give more to the employment generation schemes as opposed to putting it in other things. Now, take for instance, if we put a lot of money into say, creating big infrastructure like railway freight corridor, big roads, etc. Those don't employ so many people. Earlier you would see that in these projects hundreds of people would be working, but now you see five people working with big bulldozers, big cranes, etc. So directly, though they don't generate that much employment. So we need to refocus from there into other areas where you have much smaller local irrigation, local road building, etc., which will be not so mechanized and which will generate a lot more jobs. So it means reprioritization. Secondly, we need to raise resources from direct taxes because our direct tax GDP ratio is very very low. And as the Prime Minister said on 15th August last, he said that only 15 million people are effective taxpayers. Now imagine out of 1.4 billion, only 15 million are effective taxpayers. So that's only 1.1% of the people are effective taxpayers. So even though maybe 50 or 60 million people are filing return, but large number of them are filing either nil return or very low returns because their incomes are very low, and they have to file because if your income is above 2.5 lakhs, you have to file return. So even though you don't have to begin paying taxes till about 5 to 6 lakhs of rupees, but you have to file your return. So filing return is not the thing. It is how many people are paying effective taxes, and that number is very low because we have large number of deductions and concessions. And secondly, the black economy is very large, so a lot of income escapes the tax net. So we need to capture those incomes in our equation. So our direct tax GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world. That can be raised to maybe 10% or 12% of GDP if the government puts in the effort, into collecting the taxes. So the resources are not short for the nation. Resources are short for the government because the government is unable to collect the taxes. So government needs to make the effort to collect a lot more direct taxes.
Sir, two things are very clear here. Firstly, the size of the budget has to grow. So reallocation is one, but the size of the budget has to grow. So that is one. Assuming that the size of the budget has to grow, sir, what you are saying is one of the way of collecting this money is by ensuring that the direct taxes grow. You collect more direct taxes. Now, wouldn't that be putting pressure on the middle class once again, all over again?
No, so middle class is largely out of the tax net, as I was saying. So these 15 million people who are effective taxpayers are the wealthy people. The middle class, say, suppose India has a middle class of 100 million, right? Most of them are paying either very little tax or negligible amount of tax. They pay much more of indirect taxes. Whatever they buy shoes, they buy, clothing, they buy car, they buy scooter, they're paying taxes on that. So what we have been suggesting for the last 30 years is that lower the indirect taxes and raise the direct taxes. If you are able to collect a lot more direct taxes, you can lower the indirect taxes and give relief to the consumer through that. That would benefit the lower classes, where, as you rightly put, the income of the bottom 60% have been dropping. Now, how do you give them more income? Because if you don't give them more income, then they cannot increase consumption. If they cannot increase consumption, then capacity utilization cannot go up. If capacity utilization does not go up, then investment doesn't go up. So therefore, you have to put more purchasing power in the hand of the bottom 70% of the population. And for that, you have to cut indirect taxes. And to make up for that, you have to collect more direct taxes, because direct taxes will fall on the top 20, 30 million people who have very high incomes. That's what our data shows, that has come out recently, that the top 20% have gained 37% income, whereas the bottom 20% have lost 50% of the income. So therefore, there's a skewedness, a huge skewedness that is taking place in the last 2 years, and that skewedness suggests that we are a collectivity, and in the collectivity, the well-off have to contribute to the poor, and that's where I am reminded of what Warren Buffett said in 2000, I think it was 13, when he said that for the survival of capitalism, the rich have to pay more taxes, and he gave the example that my secretary who earns $100,000 pays a higher tax rate than I pay, whereas I earn a few $1 billion. So he said the rich have to pay more taxes, and he was supported by the American rich, the German rich, the French rich, and the Italian rich. And that he repeated again in 2018, and now recently in the pandemic he's again repeated it, because you see certain upper sections of society, they've gained enormously during this pandemic because of the rise of the stock market and the rise of incomes in certain categories. Certain industries are doing very well, like the technology companies, like the FMCG, like the pharma sector, etc. So there people have gained a lot of income, and other segments have lost out. And what the pandemic has taught us is that we are a collectivity, and we have to behave like a collectivity. So the collectivity means that those who are deprived and those who are well off, they have to, the well off have to help the, people who are deprived. And we have also seen that large number of people don't have a living wage, and that's why they could not deal with the crisis. So we have to be able to provide a living wage to people at the bottom, which means that children should get proper education, they should have proper health facility, they should have proper, housing. Otherwise, they can't cope with the pandemic. And as Biden has already warned, that more and more pandemics will come, because viruses are jumping from animals to human beings, and the next pandemic could be worse. So therefore, we have to start behaving as a collectivity and have collective responsibility for society as a whole. So for society as a whole to do well, if the wealthy pay more tax, right? I'm not saying the middle classes will pay the tax. The wealthy, the top 15 million, top 30 million, who are hiding their income, they are the ones who will be paying more taxes. So it could be through wealth taxation, it could be through gift taxation, it could be through estate duty, which were made ineffective. How did we make our wealth tax ineffective? We started giving large number of concessions. So concession on housing, concession on real estate, concession on the stock market holdings, etc. So then it became ineffective. So we were not collecting enough wealth tax. But otherwise, we can collect a lot more wealth tax. And when the wealth tax is paid, then the income tax collection will also rise. Okay, because to pay the wealth tax, you have to show income. So therefore,
Correct.
the black income generation would get affected, and you can collect a lot more of direct taxes and use that to lower the indirect taxes, which will put purchasing power in the hand of the middle class and the lower classes.
Sir, what is your opinion about corporate taxation currently in India?
So corporate taxation in India is very low, and the reason that that has become very low is that when the Soviet Union collapsed, the East European countries did not have capital, and they needed to attract capital. So they cut their tax rates, and therefore the European countries had to cut their tax rate, and globally everybody else had to cut their tax rate. And this is called the race to the bottom. So everywhere there was shortage of money for public services. Okay. Now that race to the bottom is now being recognized, and that's why Ms. Yellen, after she became the Treasury Secretary in the US, proposed that there should be a minimum corporate tax rate. You know, and she proposed a higher minimum tax rate, but realizing the political economy of it, because the rich people are in control of policies, at least 15% is being suggested. But I think in poorer countries, the corporate tax rate should be at least 25-30%, in the present situation. Because in Germany, etc., the rate of taxation, direct tax rates are higher than what we have in India. So I think we can go up to that. And if our economy is booming, capital will still come. It is, a combination of tax rate and of the fact that, your economy is not doing well, that foreign capital may not come. But at the moment, we don't have that problem. Foreign capital has been coming. So therefore, that's not been a problem for us at the moment. So I think corporate tax rate needs to be higher than the one that has been proposed in 2019. And if the economy is booming, then there'll be no problem.
Sir, there is a general understanding that GST is throttling the MSMEs. Indirect taxes are throttling the MSMEs, literally. So, what's your take on that, sir?
I agree completely, because what has happened is that the GST is all based on input credit. Now, if you are in an unorganized sector, not just MSME, but the unorganized sector, then below 50 lakh, there's no GST, and between 50 lakh and 1.5 crore, you have the composition scheme with 1% tax. But it means that you don't get input credit, so your cost is higher. And when you sell to somebody in the organized sector, then you cannot give them input credit, and in fact, they have to pay a reverse charge. So therefore, their working capital cost goes up, and therefore, demand is shifted from the unorganized sector to the organized sector. And I've been quoting the pressure cooker industry's chairman, Mr. Jagannathan, who in the annual report of the pressure cooker industry in 2018 said, we are 30 units in the pressure cooker industry, 5 in the organized sector, 25 in the unorganized sector. And we are doing very well, and we are growing at 24%, because the unorganized sector not able to cope with it, so demand is shifted to us. So this demand shift from the unorganized sector to organized sector is a result of the fact of the implementation of GST. So since that time, the unorganized sector has been further hit. So that's why I've been proposing for quite some time now that there should be a last point tax. This business of giving input credit at every stage, levying a tax and then giving input credit the next stage, to interlock, that should go away. Once that goes away, then the input credit disadvantage of the unorganized sector will disappear. The whole tax will become very simple, because it will be levied only on the MRP that is declared. Now, as Arun Jaitley said, 95% of GST is paid by 5% of the units. Okay. So therefore, it's the 5% in the organized sector which declare an MRP. That's where the effective tax collection is. So we just need to levy the tax there at the final stage. So once the input credit goes, then the unorganized sector problem will also disappear.
Sir, another very pertaining question that I wanted to ask you is, what is the impetus? What is the impetus that this time around the government is going to give to the agricultural industry? See, end of the day, agricultural industry, not only the fact that their profitability is going down, but also the fact that it is one of the highest employment generating industry. So, what do you think? While you spoke about it in the beginning of this program, I wanted to dwell a little more on the agricultural industry and what is the impetus that they are going to get.
Actually, I couldn't hear what you were saying. You're asking about?
I was asking about the agricultural industry, sir. I want to know what is the kind of impetus that this time around the government is going to give the agricultural industry. What I was saying is that agricultural industry, not only the fact that the profitability of agricultural industry is going down, also it is a large employment generating industry. So what would be the impetus like? You spoke about it in the beginning of the program, but I just wanted to just dwell a little more on that.
So, as far as agriculture is concerned, agriculture is facing higher costs, whereas its prices have not gone up. So, agriculture is different from agro industry. Agro industry uses the agriculture product to produce something, right?
Correct.
So, let's separate the agro industry problem from agriculture. Now, what does agriculture need? It needs infrastructure, it needs support, right? So that rural infrastructure, when it develops, when you have storage capacity, when you have roads and transportation, etc., then you'll find that you'll be able to give the agriculture greater support. Without that, the support will not come. So basically, what we need to do is give agriculture support in terms of like farmer produce organizations, which already the earlier budgets have proposed. Those have to be brought up properly and strengthened. Then we need to have marketing support, which the farmer producer organizations will give. And then we need to also give credit. So for instance, for agriculture, I've been saying, like industry, when you take a loan, you don't have to repay the loan every a year. You only keep paying the interest. So it's like a working capital. But agriculturists have to repay the loan, which means that they have to sell their crop at a very low price when the crop comes in. So instead, for agriculture also, you should say, okay, you have taken this loan and you keep repaying the interest. So it's like a working capital. Unlike at the moment where they have to repay the entire capital and the interest every crop. So that would help them to retain their crop and move for a higher price, which at the moment they cannot do because they cannot wait. They have to repay the loan. Then I think the input subsidies will have to be increased because the input costs have gone up. So if we don't increase the MSP, then the input subsidies will have to be also given more. So those are some of the things that are needed by agriculture.
Basically, looking at the current economy, the way the economy is going, tell me, sir, what would you recommend? Would you recommend investing more in the service sector, investing more in the industrial sector, investing more in the agricultural sector? What would help getting more employment? What would help allowing helping the economy to bounce back? What would be the best recommended investment that you would say?
So, as I was saying, we need to generate mass employment. And for that, we need to go for small projects. We need to go for rural employment generation schemes. We need to go for urban employment generation schemes. And once that happens, demand comes back up, then the private sector will start investing more. At the moment, private sector will not invest more because capacity utilization is below 70. And if it's below 70, then why would they keep on investing? So in those sectors that are doing well, they'll invest. But in other sectors, they're not going to invest more. And export markets are also very uncertain at the moment because there's a trouble everywhere. So in a sense, it is for the internal market. And the second thing, as I said, was that we need to invest in small projects rather than massive projects which are very automated. So we need to go for like a local road building, etc., which will employ a lot more people than these big highways and the railway freight corridor, etc., which will be a very mechanized construction, which will not be able to offer that much employment. So I think it's not a question of services or industry, but it's a question of the choice of where, say, like education and health, they'll employ a lot of people, right? So if you invest a lot more in education and health, and we do need to do that so that we can give good education and make children employable. We also need to take care of our health because the health systems are to be taken care of given the pandemic and given the possibility of future pandemics that may come. So these are the kind of things in which I think the investment must increase.
Sir, you are the most busiest man today in India. I understand that. And my last question, quickly, 1 minute. Sir, what are the good things that I can expect from tomorrow's budget?
So, given that the UP elections are coming, I think you probably should see. I mean, I'm not the finance minister, so I can't tell. But what I think would have been done would be allocation to rural employment generation should increase. Some announcement of urban employment generation, concessions to the farmers. I think these three things I think would be there. And one final thing, something on cryptos, because that coming of the cryptos is also going to create problem for people, especially the poor people. So I think something on cryptos might also come.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks a
Have
lot.
a nice day
Okay.
and see you very soon.